Why did Count Dooku say that it was a treat to train General Grievous, and called him one of the most talented duelists that he had ever seen? Both Dooku and General Grievous were considered to be the two most terrifying men in the galaxy at the time of the Clone War. One a Jedi Master turned Sith, and the other a mechanical monstrosity responsible for the deaths of many Jedi. Though unlike most master and apprentice dynamics, it would be incorrect to say that Dooku and Grievous's relationship was a pleasant one. Dooku despised Grievous and thought of him as a monster. Of course, Count Dooku was known to hate any being that was half flesh and half machine, which was another reason for him to dislike Anakin. Despite his disgust towards the droid general, however, we learn in the Legends novel Labyrinth of Evil that Dooku actually enjoyed training Grievous a great deal. That is not to say that their training didn't have roadblocks, or that Dooku was not repulsed by Grievous, but there was something about the droid general that Dooku did find enjoyable. And in this video, we're going to analyze Dooku's feelings towards his most dangerous apprentice, and talk about how Grievous ultimately made Dooku feel about himself and his turn to the dark side. But before we begin, the Force calls us all, and on this channel, you can learn more to hone your skill through our daily uploads. So if you haven't subscribed already, be sure to Force crush that subscribe button and increase your knowledge with us daily. Now, let us begin. The idea that Dooku actually enjoyed anything about Grievous whatsoever is definitely a shocking sentiment, as it goes against about everything we know of their relationship. But the information that we get from Dooku makes this whole situation a bit more layered. Let's read from the passage from Labyrinth of Evil. Grievous had been a delight to train as well. No need to coax him to release his anger and rage, as Dooku had been forced to do during the training of his so-called Dark Jedi disciples. The Geonosians had arranged for Grievous to be nothing but anger and rage, and as to the general's combat skills, few if any Jedi would be capable of ever defeating him. There had been moments during their extensive combat sessions when even Dooku had been hard-pressed to outduel the cyborg. Dooku begins by saying that it was a delight to train Grievous, mainly compared to the Dark Jedi students that Dooku had trained before. In Legends, there had been a few Dark Jedi that Dooku threw at Anakin and Obi-Wan every now and then. Of course, most notably Ventress and Savage, as well as Quinlan Vos. In his training with all of them, there was little to suggest that Dooku ever really enjoyed himself while teaching. Quinlan, being a former Jedi, put roadblocks in their training, as it was difficult for Dooku to coax out the darker aspects of the Jedi Master. He found training Ventress easier, but we know from the Clone Wars that Dooku had the most trouble with Savage. Overall, ever since Qui-Gon, Dooku had never again had an apprentice that really pleased him, so of course, he probably found it to be a relief when he could find a student that he was able to more easily grasp, one that understood the concepts of rage. And of course, Grievous had plenty of that. His sheer aggression and tenacity in combat alone is one of the many reasons he was so successful against Jedi. But Dooku didn't just teach Grievous aggression, but also restraint. This was because the glaring flaw with this whole situation is that Grievous had no ability to touch the Force. One might think that rage and anger would be no use of someone who could not wield the dark side. However, it was very good for Grievous, who could use these feelings to fuel his cybernetic onslaught, as well as harbor hatred for his enemies. Because Grievous could not touch the Force, Dooku would provide him with many resources and tips. One of the most fascinating lessons to the droid general was when he laid out the criteria needed for Grievous to engage a Jedi. This included fear, surprise, and intimidation. Dooku explicitly said that if any one of those elements were lacking, it would be best for Grievous to retreat. In this quote though, we learned something very important about Grievous. He was never this aggressive to begin with. The origins of Grievous are somewhat shrouded in mystery. We know that he was once a proud warrior of the Kaleesh people, and that his people were neglected by the Jedi when they needed them most. Grievous has a distinct hatred for the Jedi, but was unable to overcome them with his regular body, and therefore was thrust into becoming a cyborg, as it was Dooku who offered him this great prize and the ability to kill Jedi. We learn in the novel that one of Grievous's few requests for this alteration was to keep his mind completely intact in its original form. No tampering whatsoever. However, Dooku had ordered the Geonosians to alter the brain anyway, making Grievous nothing but rage and anger without him ever even knowing it. After countless hours of drills and training, Dooku admits that he himself is hard-pressed to overcome the droid general during drawn-out duels. And yet, despite all of these good things that Dooku has to say about Grievous, Dooku later has much more to criticize, especially when it comes with the lightsaber. In another chapter in the same book later on, Dooku is viewing Grievous as he duels a set of Magna Guards. Grievous is engaging the guards with 3 lightsabers activated. It's here where we get more insight into Dooku's feelings towards his apprentice's choice of using multiple lightsabers at once. Quote, "The only aspect of Grievous's technique that vexed Dooku was the general's penchant for using 4 blades. 2 was bad enough, even in the form they had been used by Darth Maul, or in Anakin Skywalker's sad attempt to employ the technique on Geonosis against Dooku. But to use 3? What was to become of elegance and gallantry if a duelist could not make do with a single blade? Well, what had become of elegance and gallantry in any case? It is not surprising to find that Dooku disagreed with using more than 1 lightsaber, with this being a sentiment that he would unknowingly pass on to Darth Vader through his dueling with Anakin. While Dooku enjoyed Grievous's anger and his tenacity, and he was indeed one of the most gifted of his students, even above Quinlan Vos, Ventress, or Savage, there was quite a bit to be desired when it came to Grievous's finesse, and Dooku despised this fact. Without the Force, it was impossible to wield a lightsaber effectively, or at least with supreme elegance, as Grievous in this respect proved Dooku wrong, wielding a lightsaber with tenacity and rage. In fact, Grievous's sheer brute strength made Dooku question his own form. Later in the same scene, Dooku was thinking over how powerful, quick, and agile Grievous truly was. He was a formidable sight to behold, and one that had felled many Jedi. Unfortunately, Dooku wasn't proud of this fact at all. In truth, he found it to be disheartening, especially towards his own views on Jedi combat and the lightsaber. Dooku would go on to ponder the place of finesse, and how even with Form 2 Makashi, Grievous was able to defeat Jedi. What shocked Dooku is over elegance, finesse, and knowledge of the blade. It was brute strength that won the day. He talked about it like this. Defeat often came at the hands of less experienced players who knew nothing about the traditional strategies. A professional fighter, a combat artist, could be defeated by a cantina brawler who knew nothing about form, but everything about ending a conflict quickly, without a thought to winning gracefully nor elegantly. Dooku's analogy proved that he was sorry that the Jedi were coming to an end, in part thanks to the monster that he had trained. Someone as brutish and strength-based as Grievous, the one cutting down Jedi who trained for years to hone the elegant skill of the lightsaber. Grievous was in fact an atrocity, and Dooku knew it. It was an atrocity of his own design. Wrapping up, Dooku was conflicted in his training of Grievous. He enjoyed the ease of rage that Grievous could tap into on a moment's notice, and how easily he took to combat. But Dooku was disgusted by Grievous's animalistic tendencies while wielding the graceful and beautiful weapon of the lightsaber. His tact had no elegance, and his form no finesse, and yet it worked. It was a slap in the face to everything that Dooku had trained for. But of course, what do you think, my friends? Do you believe that perhaps Dooku was overselling Grievous's effectiveness? What are your thoughts on this realization? Thank you as always, my friends, so much for visiting the channel today. May the Force be with you always, and have a great one.